Have you ever been told that maybe you're too picky and that's why you're still single? I heard that a lot, but honestly, I think a big reason why I've stayed single is because my standards were too low, not too high, and I was trying to be okay with settling. So today we're going to talk about why having standards actually will protect your heart. Hi, I'm Mary, and if you're a single Christian woman over the age of 40 and you love God, but you just don't really love being single, then this is for you. And today I want to talk about the idea that just because a man shows up in your life does not mean that he's a gift from God. So one evening I went to a basketball game at the university where I teach, and I was supposed to go with a girlfriend, but she had canceled. And so I went ahead and went by myself, and a friend of mine who was a coach, not for the basketball team, but a coach for a different team, came up and he said, are you dating anybody? I'd love to set you up with my brother. And so, I met the brother. We went out on a date, and I mean, he was charming, funny. He's a Christian. He had 2 kids and he was stable. Plus he was like really cute, just a nice guy. And I thought, see, this is my reward from God because I persevered and I was patient and I went to that game by myself. And here we go. I finally have met a good guy. We went on a couple of dates and then things started to unravel. So on our second date, he spent a lot of the date bemoaning the loss of his model girlfriend and talking about how great she was, and she was a model and she was so beautiful and she treated him like a king. And honestly, that should have been the only red flag I needed, because when a man is talking about other women in front of you, he's not focused on you. And then after that date, he started flaking and canceling, and then I just stopped hearing from him altogether. Well, a few months later, I ran into my friend who had set us up and his wife, and they were saying that, oh, we're just so sorry it didn't work out with you two. And I said, yeah, I'm really confused as to what happened. And I told them about the girlfriend and him flaking on plans, and my friend was so mad because he said, first of all, the brother had told him that we had mutually decided to not see each other anymore, which was not true. And what he was really angry about was that this, quote, model girlfriend was a stripper. And he was just beside himself that his brother had done all of this. So, no, he was not a gift from the Lord. Now, we're told in Scripture that when the Lord sends a blessing, he adds no trouble to it. That doesn't mean you're never going to have things that you need to work on in a relationship. But when you have strife and a mismatch right out the gate, that is a clear indicator that this person is not a gift from the Lord. And this was a pattern that I engaged in for many, many years. And like I said, I think it's a big part of why I'm still single, because I would just accept any man that showed up thinking, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. And, maybe the Lord doesn't want me to be so demanding, and maybe I'm materialistic if I care about what kind of job this guy has. Maybe I'm being too picky. Maybe I'm being judgmental and I'm not being fair. Maybe if the fact that I just want him to provide basic stability means that I'm materialistic and demanding. And I had friends, married girlfriends at the time, who would say things like, well, you're just really worried about money and it shouldn't really matter that much. Now, meanwhile, their husbands were PhDs and executives in Fortune 100 companies. So I noticed that they didn't have low value husbands, but it was okay for me to have one. Now, I'm not talking about if you meet a guy and you are intentionally saying, based on my values, this is the guy for me. So it's actually called a mixed income marriage. If you have a woman who's the bread earner, she's earning way more money. And, I mean, I've known couples, you probably have too, where the wife works and the husband's, a stay-at-home house husband. Here's the thing you have to be careful of, because I've known women who have gotten into those situations and then they're angry when their husband doesn't have more ambition or when he doesn't want to go out and make something of himself. Like, girl, that's what you signed up for. So you can't have it both ways. You can't want this like, oh, I just need his love, I'm the breadwinner. And then later on, you're angry because you're the breadwinner. Let's look at a couple of reasons why settling is actually going to keep you stuck. Number one, you're going to feel resentful. I dated a man one time who had declared personal bankruptcy twice. And his lack of financial stability did concern me, but then my friends were saying that I was focused on the wrong things, like love is what matters and he loves you. Honestly, I think what he loved was probably my bank account. But I was at dinner with one of my girlfriends and she was talking to me about her successful boyfriend, and they were lounging out by the pool and planning a nice vacation. And I felt so embarrassed, and I was so afraid she was going to ask me how things were going with my boyfriend, and I was going to have to talk about how broke he was. And when I say resentment, you start to resent him because he's not really what you wanted, and you resent yourself because you've lowered your standards. Now, like I said, if that truly doesn't matter to you, then that's okay. I'm just talking about being aware of and honest about your own standards, because then when you are unequally yoked with someone who doesn't share your values, it's not going to work out and you're going to be angry at him, and that's really not fair because you should have said no in the first place. Number two, you'll start playing small. I dated a really nice guy one time. I mean, super nice. And one evening I, mentioned going to the symphony, and he said he wanted to go as well. And I started worrying about the ticket price of the symphony, which our local symphony, I mean, it's not even $50 for a ticket. And I started to get very anxious about it, not because I couldn't afford it, because I was worried about whether or not he could afford it and could he afford to buy my ticket. And so I started playing small and not suggesting things that we could do together because I was so worried about his finances. And I would, just sort of stop doing the things that I wanted to do because I was embarrassed about putting him in a position because he couldn't participate in what I like to do in my own life. And honestly, that's not partnership, that's erasing yourself. Number three, you won't get what you actually need. Now, I know up until now I've been discussing finances, but when you understand what is important to you in your relationships, for me, an important component in my romantic relationships is verbal affirmation. I need to have compliments. I mean, I don't need to have them constantly, every day, all day, but I do think it's reasonable when a man shows up to pick me up and I look really great. I think it's appropriate for him to say, wow, you look really great, or you are beautiful, or, I'm so proud to be seen with you. And for some women, they really don't care about that. But for me, it matters because, I work in an environment, being a university, where people are so afraid to give compliments because they're so afraid you're going to get them on sexual harassment. But some of my students, every now and then, they're feeling bold and they'll say, you look really nice today. Am I allowed to say that? So in my work life, I know I look nice when I go to work and very few people will say anything. Well, in my personal life, especially if this is somebody who wants to share every part of my life, I do think that the minimum for entry should be compliments. But I would feel like, well, I shouldn't be so needy. He just expresses love differently. And you know what? those are excuses. And for me, when I'm in a romantic relationship and the man is never complimenting me, I start to really question how he feels about me, because here's the truth. Men value youth and beauty. And I mean, I'm not young anymore, but I think I'm doing pretty well for my age. And when a man doesn't even acknowledge that, it would make a woman say, well, maybe he doesn't find me attractive. And if he doesn't find you attractive, it's not going to last very long. So those three things, being worried and resentful and not receiving what you need, those are not the components of a healthy relationship. And when I have people who tell me, well, maybe you're just too picky, what I do is I say, okay, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a man who is financially stable, who is kind and respectful, and who is a Christian. So which of those should I compromise on? Which of those should I let go? And I make the other person tell me what is not important. So, and sometimes they'll say, well, you shouldn't be so worried about the financial stability. Okay, well, I am way, way over 40, and I have funded my own retirement, and I don't have time right now to fund a second person's retirement when they haven't taken care of their own finances. I don't have time to now come in and try to pick up a second person. So it's not because I'm so focused on money, it's because financial stability is important. And the older I get, I'm going to be less able to financially take on another person. And listen, I don't really believe that God has for us to just settle all the time and accept what we don't really want. I do think that one of the most important, in my opinion, for me, the single most important qualification is he must be a Christian. Because if we don't share our faith, that's it, unequally yoked. And then from there, you can make your own decision about what's important to you. But you have to be clear about it, and you have to be honest about it. And just understand that if you are accepting a relationship that is below your standards, you are setting yourself up for disappointment and heartbreak, and you're really not being honest with the other person, and you're really stringing them along. And then all of a sudden you're going to say, well, I really don't like the fact that you're not, financially stable. And he says, well, I'm in the same place I was a year ago. How come you didn't mention it then? So listen, I know that navigating singleness when you're over 40, it can be really lonely and scary. And below this video here, I put a free teaching I created called Overcoming Loneliness. Because when you're lonely in this season of life, you start to think, well, maybe I ought not to be so picky. And like I said, you might be feeling, hey, I'm financially successful. I just need a man who will love me. And if you're good with that, then great. But if you're in your loneliness, you're not always able to make a solid decision from that state. So you might just want to check out that free teaching. And I want to thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.